Hi everyone! This week's book, our third week of the summer reading program, is Hansel and Gretel, and this edition is written and illustrated by James Marshall. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, in a cottage near a vast forest, there lived a woodcutter, his wife, and their 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. At the best of times, the family had precious little to live on, but now there was a great famine in the land and food was scarcer than ever. The woodcutter's wife was worried that there wouldn't be enough for her to eat. "Those wretched children of yours are gobbling everything up," she said to her husband. "Do you want your pretty little wife here to waste away? Something will have to be done." "Yes, my dearest," said the poor woodcutter, who was afraid of his wife's ferocious temper. "She doesn't like us," said Gretel. "Yes, she does," said Hansel, but he didn't really mean it. One night, when the woodcutter was tossing and turning and worrying about how to feed his family, his wife revealed her plan. "Listen to this," she whispered in her husband's ear. Look at her there. "Listen to this," she said. "We will take the children into the woods, we'll give them a bit of bread, and then we'll leave them there." "Never," said the woodcutter, but his wife was badgering and badgering. "My poor children," cried the woodcutter. "I know what's best, and you don't," said his wife. "Oh dear," whispered Gretel. "Don't worry," said Hansel. "I'll take care of us." And slipping out into the moonlight, he gathered up as many white pebbles as he could find. See him there picking up the white pebbles? "What are you doing?" said Gretel. "You'll see," said Hansel. "Get up, you lazy bones," cried the woodcutter's wife early the next morning. "It's time for us to go into the forest to fetch wood." So she gave Hansel and Gretel a crust of bread. "Save it for lunch, it's all you get," and the family set off. In a short while, Hansel stopped and turned around. Soon he did it again. "Why are you lagging behind, Hansel?" asked his father. "I'm looking back at my white kitten on the roof," said Hansel. "You donkey," snapped the woodcutter's wife. "That's not your kitten, that's the morning sun on the chimney." They entered the vast forest. In the middle of the forest, Hansel and Gretel were told to build a fire of brushwood and to wait. "We'll return soon," said the woodcutter's wife, and the children were left all alone. See them there? They heard the sound of an axe chopping wood, and they thought that their father must be nearby, but it was really a bough that he had tied to a dead tree, being blown about by the wind. At midday they ate their bread, and they kept waiting. The afternoon slowly passed, but no one came. Finally, the children closed their eyes and went to sleep, and when they awoke, it was pitch black. "Are you frightened?" said Gretel. "Of course not," said Hansel. When the moon had risen, Hansel took Gretel by the hand and showed her how they could follow the trail of white pebbles. "What a clever brother I have," said Gretel, and it took them the rest of the night to get out of the forest. When the children arrived home at daybreak, the woodcutter's wife was shocked and infuriated. Look at her there. She was mad. She quickly pretended to be glad to see them. Oh, we thought you were never coming back," she said. What a meanie, huh? Hansel and Gretel believed the worst to be over, but soon there came another famine, and the woodcutter's wife began to fret. "There's hardly enough for the 2 of us to eat," she said to her husband. "We'll simply have to take the children back to the woods." "Not again," said Hansel. "Don't worry," said Gretel. But when he went to gather up more pebbles, he found the door bolted. She had seen to that. The next morning the children were given a bit of bread, and the family set off. Every few paces Hansel turned around to strew a handful of breadcrumbs behind him. See him there dropping the breadcrumbs? "Why are you tarrying, Hansel?" said the father. "Oh, I'm looking back at my white pigeon on the roof," he said. "You simpleton," cried the woodcutter's wife. "This isn't your pigeon. This is the morning sun on the chimney." When they came to the most forbidding part of the forest, the woodcutter's wife said, "You guys wait here while your father and I gather wood. We'll be back soon." Hansel and Gretel did not believe her. At midday, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, and soon as they did before, they fell asleep. When they awoke, it was pitch black. "Oh," said Gretel, "when the moon rises, we will follow the trail of breadcrumbs out of the woods," said Hansel. But when the moon rose, they found no breadcrumbs. The birds in the forest had eaten the breadcrumbs. "Oh, we'll never get out of here now," said Gretel. They wandered on deeper and deeper into the forest, eating whatever berries they could, and when they'd been away from home for 3 days, a snow-white bird appeared. "Let's follow the bird," said Hansel. When the snow-white bird led them to a clearing, there was a small house made of cookies and candy and sugar and cake. It was like no house they'd ever seen. Being terribly hungry, the children set about having a regular feast. Hansel broke off a piece of roof cake. Gretel tried to bite a bit of window sugar. It was all good, and it was good as it looked. Suddenly, they heard a shrill voice from inside of this candy house. "Nibble, nibble, little mousie, who's that nibbling on my housie?" The door flew open. "What's this?" said a lady, who Gretel was sure was a witch. "Two pretty children have come to stay. Now don't be alarmed, my angels," she said to them. "I'm really very sweet." And she took Hansel and Gretel by the hand and led them inside, where a sumptuous dinner of sugar pancakes with apples and nuts had been prepared. Hansel and Gretel ate until they were perfectly stuffed. "Time for sleep now," said the lady, and she tucked them into snug warm beds, and she tiptoed away. "She's nice," said Hansel. Said Gretel. The next morning, the lady, who was indeed a witch, snatched Hansel from his bed, carried him outside, and tossed him into a cage. "Lovely," said the witch, "just lovely. This is where I'll fatten you up, and when you're all plump and juicy, I shall have a regular feast." See, there's the cage she put him in. You know what plump means? That means heavy, chubby. She wants him to get chubby so she can eat him. "You let my brother out!" cried Gretel. But the witch, who was delighted with her handiwork, only cackled and did a little dance. There she's dancing. Poor Gretel, who had to do the witch's bidding, was put to work cooking enormous meals for Hansel. For her own dinner, Gretel was given only crab shells. Every morning the witch would go to Hansel's cage to see how much fatter he'd grown. "Hansel, stick out your finger," she would say, and Hansel would stick out an old chicken bone instead. Witches, as everyone knows, have beady red eyes and dreadfully bad eyesight. "I don't understand it," said the witch. "You're as thin as a bone. Can't you eat?" What's going on there? Now Hansel's little trick worked for some time. Every morning the hungry witch was annoyed to find that he was still so scrawny, because he kept on putting out the chicken bone instead of his finger. "Phooey," said the witch, "not yet." But finally she'd run completely out of patience. "All right, I'll just have to eat you as you are," she said. And she had a consoling thought. Perhaps she should eat the little one too. "Gretel dear," she said, "would you please peek in the oven to see if it is hot enough?" But Gretel saw what she had in mind. "I don't know how," she said, acting stupidly. "Goose!" cried the witch, "I'll show you!" And she crawled partially into the oven. Really, there was only one thing for Gretel to do. She gave the witch a tremendous shove. She pushed the witch into the oven. The horrid witch roasted to a regular crisp. "We're free!" cried Gretel. "The witch is dead!" Hansel flew out of the cage like a bird. "What a clever sister I have!" he cried. Together they explored the witch's house, where they found boxes and boxes of precious gems and gold coins. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel. "But now it's time to leave the witch's woods." When they had wandered about for some time, they came to a wide lake. A kindly duck offered to ferry them across the lake. As they neared the opposite shore, Gretel was sure they could see their father's house in the distance. And when the children reached home, their father welcomed them with open arms, for he loved his children dearly, and he had been miserable without them. He told them that his wife had died. Whether Hansel and Gretel were sorry is difficult to say, but with their father, they lived happily ever after. The end.